What's up, fellow gamers? Phreak here. I'm the design lead of Summoners Rift Team's live pod, and I'm here to talk to you about 25, full stop, Season 1, welcome to Noxus, full stop 2, the latest patch to come into a League of Legends near you. We've got a lot to talk about here in 25, full stop, Season 1, welcome to Noxus, full stop 2. I'll stop. So let's get into it. There's going to be actually quite a lot of preamble in this video because, of course, it is right after season start, and there's a lot more going on the live side. So there will be a lot here. If you want to skip down to just changes in this patch, there are timestamps in the description. You can jump to those right away. But let's talk about what the various topics are going to be. Of course, there is season start follow-up that is largely coming from the seasonal designers on SRT. There are some very quick thoughts on AD carries and assassins, which I will give you the very short Cliff Notes version of, and then ultimately promise that is something we are thinking about, something that we're probably going to dedicate some changes to, but don't have a ton to say right now. Also going to talk about the fact that Swiftplay is live and is a thing, and then of course we'll talk about the balance changes as normal going into the patch. That patch being 25. Okay, so season start follow-up. There's actually a lot going on here, right? This is the first full patch since it went live. We did put out a micro patch on the Friday after the patch went out, so last week, 5 days ago at this point in time. And so there's basically all the stuff has something going on with it. So Otacon, we now have a ton of data from our first week or so of games, and we know pretty reliably which side of the map Otacon is spawning on in all the Summoners Rift game modes. And essentially it is a little bit weighted, it's a little bit too weighted toward bot lane, and so we're doing some tweak changes to make sure it's close to 50-50, which was the intended goal. Otacon form selection. The number tuning right now has it about, I think the goal from the designer initially was 70% Ruinous, 30% Voracious. Ruinous is the kill it, get a bunch of petals. Voracious is the there wasn't enough action, get a Guardian Angel, right? If you want a way of remembering it in your head, right? If Otacon is Voracious, right, he's hungry, it means he wants more action, so he gives you all Guardian Angels, so you can go dive them and not get punished, right? That is a way to think about it. Ruinous versus Voracious. Either way, it is pretty heavily on classic SR, almost entirely Ruinous. And on Swiftplay is actually almost entirely, it's 6-to-1 Voracious. And so tuning changes in both cases to make those line up to be closer to what is expected, which is at least for classic SR, probably 70-30. In Swiftplay, I don't know what the designer's goals are, but probably not, 80-20 the other way around, right? Now, additionally, there are nerfs to ultimately both forms of Otacon here as well. So there's a nerf to Voracious, which is that right now when you kill an enemy champion, or you send them back, you recall them because they had the buff, you get 100 gold, no matter what they were worth, and you get a Bloody Petal, which is going to give 25 XP per person on your team, maybe a bit increased if they have a bad KDA. So, that's actually a printing of 200 XP roughly. So it's 100 gold and 200 XP. Of course, it doesn't feel like this kill gives me 200 XP. I gave the design that feedback hey, it feels like the Blood Rose, though you get it, there's no real ceremony attached, and so it's not obvious that it's part of the payment. Also getting, 0.5 adaptive force, whatever, is not nothing. It's not a ton, don't get me wrong, but it's not nothing, right? It's a couple dozen more gold as well on top. So anyway, what the end result here is, hey, yeah, it feels pretty bad to send someone back. Hey, the reward's not very good. Also, by the way, we have the data of the win rate here, and the win rate lift of Voracious Otacon is higher than the win rate lift of Ruinous Otacon. So it does appear to be stronger. So, hey, doubling the gold reward, pretty meaningful. We'll see if there's ever anything done elsewhere. If the Rose stays, anything else, I don't know the answer there. Ultimately not my call anyway. But aware that it feels like you're getting nothing for the takedown, and so doubling the gold value should do a lot for making that feel a lot better. And then, as mentioned, there's also a nerf to Blood Roses, so the XP per rose is going from 25 to 23, just full stop across the game, not just for Ruinous Otacon. And also the adaptive force, the way the math works out, I don't know the exact numbers, I don't know the expected value total in across the game, but essentially you get one adaptive force for the first one, and it scales down to being worth 0.33 or something around there, adaptive force, by your 39th petal, and it's going to be actually going to fall down to the minimum value by your 33rd petal, something around there. So the total amount of XP is going down by just strictly 10%, and the total amount of adaptive force is down by, I don't know the math, but some amount as well, because ultimately after your first petal, they're all just worth less than before. And then even if you're at petal 50, still all the other 32 petals before then were still lower value. So overall, a little bit less value for the mechanic. Okay. Next big change, feats of strength. Congrats on the designer and engineer and artists who worked to get this turned around really, really quickly. But the feat of First Blood is already being replaced with the feat of, I believe they're calling it the feat of Warfare. First team to get 3 kills. So I remember being near the designer when this was all going on. I wasn't in the playtest where they did it, but I was in the office next to the guy. And with part of the discussions, like we talked about it a little bit, and I can't speak for him. I assume he had his own criteria here, but I'll speak from my point of view on this one, which was picking 3 kills as the number I think was pretty good. So it's like technically a best of 5, right? Get 3 kills, not like after there are 3 kills who has more. So it's the exact same as Epic Monsters, right? Get 3, you did it. So it's very easy to understand. Also, it being first, it being typically first is still fine, right? Most teams will get 3 kills before they get a tower, or 3 kills before they get 3 epic monsters. There's not a problem with it being typically the first feat done. I don't think it was a negative really at all. I think the understandability of get 3 is very easy. I think tracking toward 5 or 7 or something doesn't seem all that important. Delaying it doesn't seem very useful in terms of it'll be a little bit less random. I don't think it's a big deal either, really. And yeah, I think just the trackability of first to 3 kills, pretty good, and it's still going to be done by 7 minutes, and that's fine because you're still waiting for first tower. It's going to be at I think median first tower rate is 13 minutes 30 seconds I think in League of Legends, and then first 3 epics takes a little bit longer, of course, but regardless, really great change. I again have no direct hand in this, but it was really awesome they turned this around so quickly, so that's going to be in there. Very minor change from the designer who did the home guard teleport respawn changes this season. Grew the home guard radius to match fountain. It's either shop radius or fountain regen radius. I forget which one, but ultimately grew the home guard so that if you're regenning, you're getting home guard buff, and then dropped the home guard duration itself by 1 second, since home guard repeatedly refunds its own duration, right? If you're walking out the fountain, right, instead of in a little circle, you're going to the outside circle, you've refreshed the full duration of the home guard buff again, and so that's going to be the duration lower to make up for that, so that you don't get across the map significantly faster than you currently do right now in League of Legends. Okay, so that's all the season start follow-up stuff. I wanted to bring up something real quick as well. Froxon tweeted this I think late last week as well, but he tweeted out a bunch of data around snowballing rates and the win rates of certain objectives like First Blood or Otacon or whatever. And basically from all the metrics that we have, the game is no more snowbally than it is on from last year. But what's technically true isn't all that important. What matters is how players feel about things. And so this is, for example, why we nerfed some of the tier 3 boot upgrades in the micro patch last week, even though I really don't believe they're overpowered. And in fact, I'm confident some of them are quite weak, like the Sword Shoes upgrade. It's just wrong to buy them. Players feel like things are OP, and so it's okay, well, we can just tune that into you guys realize not, that's fine. Ultimately, your feelings matter more than what is real, because you're playing games to experience things, not to mimic reality. Imagine trying that would be weird in League. So whatever, right? It doesn't matter what's actually true, it just matters how the game feels. And so if it feels too OP, fine. But the thing that's in the back of my head is that probably long term y'all are going to realize how strong feats actually are, and then we can tune things to be mathematically appropriate instead of how they feel. Either way, that'll probably happen over time. That's basically the rundown on season start follow-up. Let's go to the next topic. Assassins. So one issue I've seen brought up a little bit is Assassins. This one is actually very strongly backed by data. If you just take a look at Assassin win rate patch over patch, and you just go down every single Assassin in the game, they almost all lost around 1 to 1.5% win rate. Some a little bit higher, some a little bit less. And the primary reason, right, is Eyeball Collector run away. And Eyeball Collector is really good. Turns out 30 Depth of Force is a really good rune. In general, and this actually, I've done the math a couple of times. I haven't rigorously done it for every single run in the game, but it just pans out pretty well. Each minor rune is about 2% win rate worth of power. That if you were to magically delete the rune page off of, or if you were to randomly delete a rune off of a champion, they would lose about 2% win rate. It's just basically how that works. Obviously, keystones are worth more, but for a minor rune, it's about 2% win rate. And so if the new domination runes aren't as good as Eyeball Collector, which they all ran, there were 2 Eyeball Collectors per game in every game of League of Legends across 10 players, that lo and behold, Assassins lost about 1.5% win rate or so from the 30 Adaptive Force they got from Eyeball Collector, which, by the way, stacks really, really fast in a solo queue environment. Obviously is the exact core stat that Assassins want, raw AD and ability power. it, is obviously like all the Dark Harvest and what's it called? Like electric users are just clearly running this. Halo Blades obviously can, sit here as well. And yeah, unsurprisingly, this is a very direct one-to-one comparison of, oh, the class that's almost hardbound to the domination tree. Look what happened. Now, a couple thoughts here. One, we are more than happy to have viable runes outside of the domination tree for assassins. This is specifically why First Strike exists, was, if I can paraphrase the designer correctly, meant to be a high-risk assassin rune outside of the domination tree. And it is. But obviously, like, hey, if the domination tree sucks because these runes suck, well, 1, we can buff the runes. 2, we can buff Electrocute, Dark Harvest, and Halo Blades. That's fine as well. Now, a couple other things going on here. It was an explicit goal of these changes to move part of the domination tree away from solo queue power and into pro play power. It'd be pretty sweet if assassins could come back into pro play. But of course, Zed and Talon and Kiana are tuned around the fact that they almost always have Eyeball Collector, which is 18 attack damage by 20 minutes in solo queue and is 3 attack damage by 20 minutes in pro play. Yeah, so Kiana just has 15 less AD in pro play. Yeah, no one's playing her. Shocker, right? Like, of course. And like, that's a pretty big deal. It turns out your champion's really bad when you're just 2% lower win rate than other champions because your rune doesn't work in pro play, right? I think that's a very, very meaningful thing to think about, that it's a lot hard. And of course, like, yes, you can run Ghost Poro, you can run Zombie Ward, don't get me wrong, but like, the assassins people are playing in solo queue are getting a bunch of kills running around with Eyeball Collector, right? That's just how that's going. So to circle back to it, it was basically explicitly changing both the inputs and the outputs of these runes to be like, well, actually, pros really are going to run in towards a lot of the time. And so Sixth Sense is a really big deal because now as LeBlanc or Talon or whatever that you were in fact not seen on your roam across down to the bottom of the river. And yeah, the mid laner probably called Mia, but still. Or you did run a Riot Room and you got to kill it. You didn't have to buy Umbral Glaive. You just got to kill the ward, and congratulations. Right? Deep Ward, right? If you want to keep Yellow Trinket, congratulations. These things are now stronger. You can go deep ward your opponents and feel good about it. And ultimately, right, they're the inputs, right, get a bunch of takedowns are not solo queue skewed. So end result here is there are, of course, several buffs to these runes, right? They're getting a little more powerful. Grizzly Mementos is getting 50% more trinket haste per takedown. Deep Ward's getting 15 to 30 seconds increased for Yellow Trinket specifically. Sixth Sense is getting a 25-second cooldown decrease for melee and a 10-second cooldown decrease for ranged champions. So they're going to be a little bit more useful overall. And the end result is going to be that these runes are going to be a bit more powerful. We think they are possibly actually too good, air quotes, in pro play. We're going to be clear, mostly bounce them around solo queue. And if these runes are too good in pro play, as opposed to Eyeball Collector being garbage in pro play, that's a win in our book because it means assassins might be a bit more pro viable, and that would be pretty sweet. While still just being like, and look, if at the end of the day, we need to buff a bunch of assassin kits, give them better AD ratios or rank 2, rank 3, whatever base damage is, because we have to make up for the 30 ability power that Eyeball Collector's not giving. That is fine. We are happy to tune items. Happy to tune the champions. I think the items are relatively appropriate. Anyway, of course, there are some assassin buffs in this patch. Of course, we are not done. Again, 15 champions lost 1.5% win rate or so. We will have to bring that back in some way. Some of this is going to be this. Some of this is going to be buffing Electrocute, because obviously there is damage being lost in this tree, and we can bring some of it back. And so we have to come up with the plan for how much are we going to systemically rebuff assassins, and how much we're going to simply buff the champions themselves. We will figure that out over the course of the patch. There will be changes probably trickling in over the course of 0.3, as you'll probably see them trickle in on PPE in a week's time or so. But hey, by the way, that is assassins. Let's move on to the next topic, which is AD carries. So, of course, there are some buffs this patch. There is a fairly small set of buffs to Lord Dominic's and Mortal Reminder. There are much larger buffs to Yuntal Wild Arrows. Anyway, what I can tell you is that we're going to be doing some deeper dives into what we want the sort of the median AD carry to do. So I'm going to bring up this point of the median AD carry. AD carries are generally a scaling class. They are generally an auto-attacking class. They are generally a target-agnostic class. Now, in my mind, AD carries are actually much more varied than most other classes in the game. Because really just says, if you're an AD carry, you are a ranged auto-attacker. There's a lot of stuff there. You could argue Jace is a AD carry. I think that's probably a little bit too far, but like Jace and Lethality Varus are kind of the same champion, but Varus gets to be called an AD carry and Jace doesn't. Like at a certain point, maybe they shouldn't be, right? Urgot is really a juggernaut, but he's an AD carry. Okay, I'm kind of griefing. Sorry, this is not meant to be a bad faith argument around what's an AD carry. The point I'm trying to make is that there is a large variety in what an AD carry is. Vayne is good at killing tanks. Draven and Jhin are not. Now, they don't use all the same item systems, but being like, actually, every AD carry is a tank killer, and then being sad when Jhin and Draven can't kill tanks, I don't think is appropriate. Now, to be clear, the median AD carry should be pretty good at killing tanks. And in fact, my belief right now, although we'll do some more investigation and some more thinking and then being like, yes, let's execute towards a plan, towards a vision, I would expect that the median AD carry should be better at killing a tank than the median mage. And better can mean a lot of things. It could mean a target dummy DPS test. It could mean the ability to itemize into tank busting. It could mean inherent kit strength that comes from percent pen or health reduction or percent health damage rather, or true damage or something else. There's a lot of things this could look like. Obviously, Vayne has percent health true damage on her W. Of course, she's good at tank killing. Should she be better than literally every other mage in the game at tank killing? Not sure, but she'd be good at it, right? Anyway, this is all to say that, yeah, the median AD carry should probably be slightly better at tank killing than most classes. Maybe skirmishers are meant to be more target agnostic, since skirmishers don't often have the luxury of target access and safety. They have to be able to kill their targets very quickly. I would expect that like Gwen and Master Yi probably actually need even better anti-tank tools than like Ashe or Caitlyn, who are like, to me, like pretty median AD carries. They just kind of right click you. They have some spells, but like there's Draven on one side and Jhin on that side, and then there's like Vayne on the other, and it's like, yeah, kind of in the middle is like roughly Ashe and Caitlyn, and it's like they're just kind of normal champions. They're like median AD carries, and so again, it's basically saying like, hey, can we make sure that these are doing, like, the systems are in the place to make sure this does the right thing? Can we make sure the champion kits are in the right place to do the right thing? Because one thing I want to bring up is I'm actually personally happy with the relative power of tank items, and pretty close on the overall power of tanks themselves. And I'm actually pretty happy with overall combat pacing, that like we have lowered snowballing, we have slowed down combat a little bit. As a random comparison point, I was looking at it recently, the jump in, so one way we measure combat pacing is just the average time to kill just across the entire game of League of Legends, average across every single game in a given patch. And so the jump, the measurable distance between 12.9 and 12.10, 12.10 was the durability update, is identical, like in number of seconds, which is like 0.9 seconds, I think, is identical to the jump between 13.1 when I started at Riot as a designer and current patch. That like the delta between 12.9 and 12.10 is the current delta between 13.1 and 25.S1.2. So and that is, and to be clear about that is the current high watermark. Like the combat is the slowest it's ever been in the recorded history of League of Legends. And I'm not trying to go any slower. It maybe could go a little bit faster. That's maybe okay. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty happy with the current pacing here. I'm not trying to further slow down the game. I'm happy with it. There's a lot that can go on in this topic. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time talking about like further adjustments to combat pacing and what we now have room to work with, but like, hey, by the way, here's some data with just like, here's a lens, here's a viewpoint. This is true so far. Okay, so basically, yeah, through the lens of agnosticism, through the lens of scaling, through the lens of the median AD carry, we want to basically make sure that we like the vision of what the median AD carry should do, and then we should make sure that they can actually do that. And it could be that, like, actually, yeah, in a target dummy test, AD carry is looking really, really good, but for whatever reason, maybe, you know, they can't target dummy. Like, it's harder to target dummy as an AD carry than it is as, like, a mage, or maybe it's not, or, you know, who knows. So, again, there are things to look at, things to talk about, but this is a project that we are taking on and trying to make sure the experience of playing AD carry is meeting what we think is appropriate here. Okay, another topic here is that, hey, by the way, Swiftplay came out this patch. Swiftplay is sweet. It is right now a meaningful portion of game hours. It is massively more popular than old quick play, it by an order of magnitude. And Swiftplay maintenance kind of belongs to Summoner's Rift team. It basically belongs to LivePod. Now, not everything right now belongs to Live. the designers and people who worked on getting Swiftplay out the door are still on the project and doing some work here. But in terms of overall like actual live maintenance, that belongs to LivePod, which means yes, we will have some of our team dedicating some of our time to talking about Swiftplay balance and maintaining Swiftplay as a balanced game mode. That's just going to be something that we're going to be doing, right? And the like relative share of how much work we put in is going to be based on basically the relative share of how much players play it, right? If it ends up being half of all of our like Swift game hours, and Swiftplay is more popular than ranked solo queue or more popular than normal draft or whatever, well, it turns out it's a really big deal, and we should put a lot of resources behind it to make sure that the experience of playing Swiftplay is good. If Swiftplay is the single smallest Summoners Rift queue, okay, well, it's not a huge deal, and, you know, we'll make sure it's like relatively balanced, but obviously most of our effort would then be on the like classic SR experience that normal draft and like rank solo queue and rank flex all share, right? You know, they all inherit the same balance state. They all inherit the same systems changes, right? So this will essentially be based on how popular the mode actually gets, but it is quite popular, which is cool. Anyway, for now, as far as Swiftplay balance is concerned, like just the balance perspective of it, we're using basically a simple oracle. The sort of balance targets, the kind of player we're balancing for is very different, right? In the case of like classic SR, we generally aim relatively high elo. We aim relatively high experience. This is why like champions like Azir are correct to have like a 47% win rate, because most players are bad at Azir. And if you're good at Azir, he's fine. Actually, regardless of MMR, just if you're good at Azir, he's a good champion. Whereas for Swiftplay, we actually don't care about random mastery 15 super deep player, and we don't really care about your average challenger player. Basically, it's like, well, you should just be able to have fun playing a champion in Swiftplay. And if that means that Rengar is broken if you're a one-trick, I don't really care that Rengar one-tricks are OP in Swiftplay. What I care about is that players get to have fun playing Swiftplay when this is generally going to be a slightly more casual audience. It's generally going to be a newer player audience overall. And, you know, if it turns out that actually only people who like Swiftplay are challenger players, okay, we'll think about that some more. But, like, right, we're generally targeting a different segment of players than, like, core Summoners Rift ranked solo duo balance, right? And so the types of things we care about, the way we measure it, our win rate bands, all those things are different, right? Anyway, one other thing to bring up is nuance. So for example, hey, if we're going to balance every champion to have like at most a 55% win rate and at least a 47% win rate, this might never catch 48% win rate Garen being bad. I have no idea if Garen's win rate's 48%. I haven't looked. But it's like, hey, Garen at 48% win rate is probably really, really bad. And we should probably buff him so he's like 51 or 52 or something. And again, those are all things we have to figure out. That all takes time to audit and make a call around where champions should actually live and what the right target is and what the right, you know, tools for that are. At some point, right, just, hey, by the way, Summoners Rift Live does own Swiftplay balance, and so that is a thing that we're going to be doing going forward. Okay, let's go now to the actual changes going into the game. Of course, a few slides ago, we had systems changes that we talked about in terms of changes to Otacon and feats and whatever else, but here are the more small-scale, like, live scope systems changes here. All right, so Mortal Reminder and Lord of Regards have been buffed by 5% flat pen for no more gold. Now, ultimately, without breaking these items apart, there's not a lot of room for these items. Now, I don't think these items are weak. I don't even think AD carries are particularly weak overall. In general, I just don't think that's true. The point to be made, though, is, hey, we have pulled a lot of target agnosticism away from AD carries over time. Cut down got changed from deal % more damage to champs who are high health, who are have a lot of max HP, to deal more damage to champions who are healthy. AKA it's like good at poke, it's good for other classes, it's not specifically a tank killer or a fighter killer. That's gone. The Giant Slayer passive, of course, is gone from Lord Dominus Regards. That was another, 5 to 20% damage amp that is gone from the game as well. LDRs had more armor pen in the past before. That's, of course, gone. Kraken Slayer used to deal true damage. That's gone from the game. Kraken Slayer used to do more damage based on how many times you hit somebody instead of how low they got. That was more of a tank busting pattern compared to the current one, which is more of a anti-squishy pattern. Now, personally, I kind of like that. Of course, it's a name mismatch, but if Blade of the Rune King is anti-high health, Kraken Slayer is anti-low health because the less health they have, the quicker they get to low HP, and then that passive actually kicks in and does more damage. So, though again, it's a name mismatch, and though thus it's a kind of a flavor mismatch, I think there is a reason for Kraken to exist as an anti-squishy on-hit item, because there aren't many of those, right? There's not a lot of items that specifically say they're against squishies except for assassin items. I think it's kind of interesting to exist. Regardless, again, So small buffs here. A very, very large buff to Yuntal. This probably makes it skyrocket to the #1 AD carry item for most crit users. It is 5 AD and 10 AS for 100 gold. That is a massive buff. This almost certainly has it completely overtake Collector. Worth noting that since Yuntal is an attack speed item, I expect very strongly that there are going to be a ton of builds that are Yuntal IE LDR. And just like that, a whole suite of crit autohackers who don't super need Essence Reaver are going to be really good at killing tanks because they're going to have IE and LDR and item 2-3. And that's going to be really, really strong. So I expect this buff to be very huge and have a really meaningful impact in overall AD carry builds, overall AD carry power levels, and we'll see what happens after this one. But I expect this to do a lot of heavy lifting for overall DPS and the power of the class overall. Next, we go on to individual champion buffs. As mentioned, there are definitely assassins who got into a pretty bad state. So Evelyn, one of the AP assassins who kind of lost quite a bit. There's now some more move speed on the E rank up. The R AP ratio is up by 0.1. This can be multiplied by like 2.4 or something based on your opponent being low. So it's going to one shot more reliably. Master Yi still pretty weak overall. We didn't end up doing follow-up buffs to the crit ratio on Q, though. There is with Yuntal being buffed, it's it's going to get a little stronger there as well. But ultimately, I think at some point we will follow up on the Master Yi Q ratio. Again, it's better than it was 3 months ago, but it's still not close to build crit Yi, and so again we can still bring that up and bring it within 1.5% win rate. It's not in this patch. I didn't do the change here. Honestly, the designer who did this was like, yeah, but I don't know like the math on the crit scaling and didn't want to overshoot it, and so we just kind of didn't do it. But some flat AD growth and some bonus AD ratio on E are going to give Master Yi some more damage, of course. Let him chew through tanks a bit better as well with the E going on. Malzahar actually was driven initially by the Swiftplay balance. So we have various tools for mode-specific game balance, one of which got added this season, where we can do base stat overrides and be like, actually, I'd like your armor growth to be 0.5 lower, or I would like your health growth to be 6 higher, or whatever. You just say like health growth +6, and then just whatever it is on SR, just +6 on Swiftplay. And the other one, though, which came out with Arena a year or so ago, is that we can do overrides on individual spells and say, look, this variable called base damage, or this variable called AP ratio is going to be this number instead. It's 0.3 on Summoner's Rift, it's going to be 0.15 on Arena, or 0.15 on ARAM, or 0.23 on Swiftplay, whatever. Now, that requires scripting the abilities to use sort of more recent data structures, and not all of our old champions have the new data structures in place. So Malzahar is a champion, for example, where none of his abilities are using the new data structures. And so in order to let us do changes to Malzahar that weren't just lower your armor and health regen and mana pool, I'm not even sure we allocated mana pool as a possibility because we don't want champion fields to change very much. They also want to like lower his base armor by 13 or something. That wouldn't have to be that high. Had to build in new scripting onto the W and the R. And when doing new scripting onto the W and the R, pretty small scale, I realized, I can make the W a little bit more generous to Malzahar players. And so the way Malzahar W works is the way that the pets work when they attack. They run a logic flow every single time they hit. And that logic flow used to be look up meaning the pet's attack damage, look up like the AP ratio and the AD ratio and the amount of AD and the amount of AP and the rank of the W and other things, do a bunch of math, put it all together, and then be like, oh yeah, now add that to my total attack damage, and then that's my hit. And I was like, well, the like total attack damage of the pets are already held in the W, and the like tooltip is basically already showing you the W printout, the damage printout. So like, why don't I just store it all here in the W, and then the like as one calculation, and then when the minion goes to attack, it just looks up the number every time. And so the minion's AD is going to be fake, but whatever. It was already fake as it was regardless. But now basically, if you put down your W and Malzahar levels up, because it references the level scaler on Mal's W, not the AD of the pet. If you put a W down, then you level up, your pet's going to do like 7 more damage or whatever, which is obviously not that common, but like, hey, for every second or third wave, you precast W, then level up, and then, whatever, congratulations. Now, things like ability power, things like ranking your W, those were already referenced, but now the level scaler part of W is there as well. Also, tooltip update, it now actually shows the total damage of W instead of just leaving off the 12 to 20 by rank from the calc itself. So that's there as well. Great. Anyway, some, minor QOL. It's technically a load of power, so it's listed here. All right, Blue Cane. Blue Cane is doing very, very poorly. Red Cane is fine. So buffing the passive damage on Blue Cane. There aren't that many blue versus red levers. This is one of them. Smolder is getting Infinity Edge added to its Q scaling. It's now just going to look up his total crit damage instead of just always making it 1.75. So congratulations, Smolder players. If you want to add IE to your build path and get more Q damage, you can. Yuumi doing fairly poorly. Of course, Yuumi never buys boots. She shouldn't be. And so in a season that says, hey, most champions are getting about 100 free gold worth of stats half the time, Yuumi doesn't get that. Now, is that a ton of power? Not really, but she's not doing all that well. And so a small buff to her Q cooldown at levels like 10 and 11, I think. A buff to her passive heal AP ratio, and a buff to the R damage AP ratio, all going up a little bit here. Okay, next up, champion nerfs. Cassiopeia was heavily overcompensated for not having the ability to buy boots. If you consider that feats turn on at level 10, let's say, right? A normal champion gets 5 armor. Cassiopeia was getting 20 move speed. 20 move speed is way better than 5 armor. Now, to be clear, 10 move speed is also still better than 5 armor. And again, for now, tier 3 boots are bait until players realize that they're not that good, and we can then tune them appropriately to like be fair items. But regardless, Cassiopeia, of course, doing far too well. So a simple nerf there. Aurelia. So this is one thing that I'm trying to do. Is, as I mentioned earlier, I think combat pacing is pretty appropriate in League. I think it could get a little bit faster. I'm not trying to make it any slower. One thing I would like to do is start to unwind the incredibly large amount of armor growth in the game. I just think there's simply too much armor growth. And this has two causes. One, it makes percent pen items ubiquitous, because if even Annie and Jinx have 100 armor, why would I not build LDR against every champ in the game? So I'd like to long-term get squishy champion armor down to like the 85 range by level 18. Now, we are very far from that, to be clear. But like, if slowly over time we can peel out about 1 armor growth from every champ in the game, I think that would be very reasonable, and something that I'm very, very slowly working toward. When there's space, whenever we're doing live balance changes, I will try to strip armor when I can, when it's reasonable, specifically for squishier classes, so that, one, LDR is not, and items like it, Black Cleaver, Sereldos, whatever, to make them less like just stupidly good because everyone has so much armor. And the other is actually allows lethality to not have to be quite so strong, and it also allows assassins to not fall off a cliff quite so hard, because it's like, oh yeah, Jinx just leveled up and gained 5 armor, she just undid half a serrated Dirk. Wow. And that's for, for like a level 16 or level 17 or whatever, right? And so that's a really big deal, and I think that contributes somewhat to assassins being really, really pressed to like have to push really far ahead, because champions get so durable against their core combat stats so quickly, while still like, letting there be a good amount of armor on tanky or melee classes who need to like withstand this kind of stuff and are fine to be natively good against assassins and whatnot. That, again, that is a pretty long-term ongoing process, but hey, by the way, I would like to make room for us to start peeling armor out of the game in late game. No one way to do that is to start peeling late game damage out from elsewhere, because one thing that is true is that combat tends to speed up as the game goes on, as the game goes later, and if you peel out growth stats, especially durability growth stats, right, then champions get squishier and squishier later. In fact, one thing that's also true is that as you go into late game, people are more grouped, which means, yeah, at level 7, whatever your stats are, whatever your items are, whatever your skill ranks are, you're fighting 1v1, and so combat takes, some amount of time. When you're facing at level 18, yeah, your health is higher, your spell damage is higher, your ability power is higher, your attack damage is higher, but also 3 people hitting you, not just 1. And that means that you're going to die 3 times as fast, roughly, right? You're going to be stunned. Now you can't dodge skill shots anymore. Now everyone else is more accurate, or someone shredded your armor, and now everyone's doing 30% more damage. And, right, these things will happen. And so one thing that I'm trying to do a bit is peel out a lot of late game unneeded damage from champions. So Aurelia, now, does she need to have a weaker late game? Not necessarily. But does she need to be squishier late game? I don't think so at all. We could make her landing phase worse. We could make her first max worse, but like, I don't care that Aurelia is a little bit early game focused. I think that's fine. And I think keeping Aurelia's autos as relevant is important. I think keeping Aurelia's passive as relevant is important. Keeping Aurelia's Q as relevant is important. These are the core like factors of her combat pattern. So I am more than willing to be like, yeah, Aurelia scales her Q by leveling up, and her passive by leveling up, and her auto by leveling up. She doesn't need good rank ups on W and E and even R to like keep doing more damage. She doesn't care about these. Like, yeah, there's going to be some breakpoint somewhere where like channeling W on the wave is going to be weaker, right? Yep. And she's going to miss some like wave flare breakpoint at some point. That's going to be true. That's going to be there. But like, obviously you'd rather have me take, 10 damage off E than 3 damage off of Blade Surge, if it was even the same win rate. But like, I'm happy to start peeling damage off things that people don't need, that they just don't care about. When it's just, there's free real estate, there's space for it, we can just move things down. When it's like, yeah, this just doesn't need to scale that hard, right? Irelia E could do 180 damage at max rank and you'd still be happy to cast it and stun someone and get your Q reset. It's going to go down to like 230. It could go 50 lower and still be reasonable. The only reason I went for W and E is there's a decent number of Irelia players who max E second, and though it's still going to be wrong to max E second, hey, you technically get that gap a little bit closer. Not that it really matters, but it was just kind of in my head is like, oh yeah, we can make this a little bit like less complete bait by like bringing down W and E kind of equally and not only bringing down E. Sure, okay. Is that the sickest reason why? No, but like whatever. We nerfed a couple of things down by a fair bit. Great. Tahm Kench, pretty deserving of a nerf. As I mentioned, I'm actually pretty happy with the overall combat pacing in League. I'm actually pretty happy that tanks are very, very tanky, but it means that the total package of those tanks needs to be appropriate. And so Tahm Kench needs to be a pretty balanced champion. He's 51.3 roughly, win rate roughly in top, roughly in support here as well. That's a bit too good, don't get me wrong. Tahm Kench is probably supposed to be, 49.x in most cases, and so it takes a pretty meaningful amount of damage down. Now, is Tahm Kench still going to be a threat in sustained combat? Absolutely. Every tank needs to be threatening to some degree, right? Every tank needs to say you can't ignore me, because a high health pool says you should ignore them, and if it's like, no, I have sustained threat, you can't ignore me, that's required. Like, champs all need to feel good, they need to perform their function, they need to project threat, they need to be not ignorable. And so Tahm Kench should be some level threatening. I'm happy with how tanky Tahm Kench is. I am generally just think that's fine, and so Tahm Kench should deal less damage. Now Q does a lot. It's a big slow. It can be a big stun. It heals him for a ton of health. It also deals his passive damage on top, and so the actual damage of Q is much higher than tooltip looks. It's a lot of damage. This thing does so much, and so guess what? Taking 525 off the damage, I expect this to hopefully be relatively close between top and support in terms of actual throughput. Obviously, top Tahm Kench gets a lot more bonus HP and a lot more levels to level his passive, and so he can ignore base damage changes a little bit more, but also support Tahm Kench doesn't reach level 9 as fast, and so Tahm Kench is going to feel the minus 25 in top lane more than going to feel it in support. It should be relatively equal in both cases, but again, the point here is to lower damage where Tahm Kench doesn't need it, because Q already does a lot of stuff. W is quite unreliable, and I think even though it has like 100 base damage at rank 1, I think that it's okay for a spell that lands so rarely. You're not going to get that much winner off of it. And at the end of the day, I thought Q was a reasonable change here. And move on to Victor here. Victor, definitely I don't know if he's like actually the best mid laner in the game. I could contend that he's not. Obviously, he's doing very, very, very well. He's sustaining quite a pick rate. His ban rate has seemingly stopped decaying. It's been pretty flat every day this patch so far. And just obviously like, okay, hugely popular, that's great, but they're sticking around because he's like kind of OP, and yeah, he has definitely room to go down. And like the data indicates as well that like, yeah, he's OP if you know how to play Victor. His win rate being 51.5 is obviously not absurd. Like Anivia is higher, for example, or Aurelion Sol is higher in most elos, but there's obviously a lot of still new Victor players who are bad at him, and he's not like the hardest champion, but he's not super, super easy. So regardless, yeah, Victor, again, right? If we're going to make room for lowering a bunch of armor growth over time and making late games, tread water roughly in late game throughputs here, then it's like, okay, well, I can lower your late game damage, or on health growth and what else is needed, right? Like just overall, like, hey, if you can start peeling out late game damage, you can start peeling out late game durability and keep everything kind of the same. Great, cool stuff. Okay, anyway, point being, here's late game damage that I think Victor will not miss. Q auto attack AP ratio. It's there. It's relevant. It matters. Absolutely. But hey, it also does your total AD on top. So like, it's going to still chunk for 230 or whatever, like pretty reliably. Okay, minus 10 on the AP ratio here because like, yeah, it's part of his kit. Yeah, it matters. This actually matters even at level 2 because he's going to have 38 ability power at level 1 or 36, I guess. He's probably running attack speed, so it's 27, but whatever. The R tick damage, this ticks multiple times. It's quite a lot of damage out here. Yeah, it doesn't need to blow you up quite as hard. So Victor's losing some sustained damage, but like his wave clear didn't get touched. His upfront burst from QER didn't get touched. His durability, it got nerfed last time, didn't get touched otherwise here, right? So it's like, hey, we have the space to work with. Can I bring down late game damage you don't care about quite as much as your core tools? Okay, that's kind of the choice here of nerf. Move on to Swiftplay. One thing I'm going to bring up around Swiftplay overall is we want the sort of core Summoner's Rift experience to still be real in Swiftplay, acknowledging that champions have way more guaranteed scaling. And because champion scaling is guaranteed, and because the player base who's playing Swiftplay is less good at their champions, we see hard champions like Qiyana and Rengar, unsurprisingly, don't look as good. But the thing I want to bring up here, because there's Kayle nerfs in the micro patch that came out on Friday, and there's Kayle nerfs in this patch as well, is we can't probably support as extreme of scaling profiles as what already exists right now on like SR Classic. Because scaling is so much more guaranteed, there's so much more gold, there's so much more XP, that we just can't sustain like 10% win rate growth champions like Kayle, because that's just not going to be tenable. Now, at the same time, we also want champion feelings to still be similar. So we are generally not going to change base move speed. We're generally not going to change mana and mana costs, because and again, we like actually want the core experience of playing the game out to be similar. And so we really don't want to use like deal 5% more damage or take 10% more damage type mods, because you get to spaces where it's like, I am laning against Draven. Let's pretend Draven's weak in Swiftplay, and we say, Draven, you deal 10% more damage. Imagine laning against that Draven, who's already a good laner, and we said just deal 10% more damage. That's a horrible experience and does not match what SR feels like. Now, at the same time, here's Kayle over here, and it's like, yeah, Kayle, you could argue, like, we could maybe do a deal 10% less damage to champions thing, but, like, that makes her even more hopeless early game and probably still becomes an unstoppable force late game. It's like, we can get the win rate in the right spot, but, like, I think the flatness of that is generally going to be a negative. And so a lot of what we're doing here basically is we've built in base stat overrides, base stat adjustments, and doing ability changes to try to like essentially keep the most important parts that we can, buff things that are going to be or nerf things that are going to be fairly inoffensive and not core to the experience of the champion, and kind of allow that to work well. So one big suite of buffs here, and this is going to affect like 7 champions, right? Gangplank, Twist of Fate, Senna. There's just a lot of champions who print gold. Pike. Champion gold generation is now going to be ignored when calculating comebacks. Because one thing that's true, right, is if you have less gold than the average person, you earn more gold. Which means if you're laning or playing against Gangplank and Gangplank is printing gold, your team goes, oh, we have less gold than the average champion. Give us more gold. And so Gangplank, by existing, prints gold onto the enemy team. TF, by existing, prints gold onto the enemy team. Senna, by existing, to a smaller degree, prints gold onto the enemy team. That's obviously not great. And so work was done to make sure that those flows were accepted from the comeback flow, so that Gangplank and TF don't print gold for their opponents. Many of the lowest win rate champions were in this cohort here. Not all of them, but some of them were here. And so have to, pull that out. And so there's like 8 champion buffs here because they're not going to flood gold into their opponents. Next up is Qiyana. Qiyana, pretty simple buff. She's not doing all that well. This is an example of like Qiyana having a pretty low win rate in core like classic SR is pretty normal. She's hard to play. She's very hard to master. She doesn't have like a Riven or Katarina level of like mains share, and so Qiyana's gonna have a low win rate. And in the interest of like the game being balanced around highly skilled players, that's fine in SR Classic. Since Swiftplay is not targeting that demographic, Qiyana, even if she's not technically underpowered, people are really bad at her, and let new players have fun with Qiyana, and so Qiyana gets, here's some flat HP. I chose E bonus AD ratio because it's the kind of spell that I figured Qiyana players would just kind of use, like, well, I'm just going to hit my buttons on you and just like play the game. And so I figured this kind of thing that newer Qiyana players would get more use out of because they just press E on the enemy champion and get stuff out of it. Rengar, another champion, not only is he, of course, weaker from AD assassin stuff, but also might have less time to get Bone Tooth Necklace stacked because the game is faster. So less of the game is being played around having 5 stacks of the necklace. But also, Rengar's really hard. People are bad at him. And so it's like, let's just make him just brain dead, easier to play. They're going to be bad. They're going to be worse at running out than back in and leaping in or whatever. So have some health growth, have some attack damage growth. You can just be a big dumb idiot and hit people, and you'll be better than before. A lot of win rate here to Rengar. Sivir. It surprised me, but Sivir, like, pretty strongly is the most obvious AD carry outlier at really, really low win rates. I don't know why this has happened. It's, again, kind of surprising me. I would have felt like Sivir's traits would work well in Swiftplay, but they don't seem to. So here's 1% win rate with AS growth. Have fun. On the nerfs, as mentioned before, Kale is just the strongest Swiftplay performer, right? Incredibly strong level and gold scaling in a game mode that gives extra gold and XP and lets you have a bad landing phase and not care. Yeah, Kale's best champ in the game. So she already had attack damage growth, attack speed growth, and part of her W nerfed in a micro patch. We're now nerfing Q damage rank up and Q slow rank up here. So it's going to be, stuff she's picking up by level 13. And so it's the kind of stuff where she's probably not going to feel it as strongly. We're going to try to keep E feeling good, the waves feeling good, the attack speed feeling good, outside of what nerf have given to her AS growth. But keep in mind, she still has her passive to feed AS, so it's not like she's low attack speed as a champion overall. And she's going to build Ashes Tooth and all those things, right? Like, that all is still there, don't get me wrong. But there's only so much we can peel out of W or R or Q. But again, also our, balance bounds are not that Kale speed 50% by any means. So Malzahar, minus 0.5 armor growth, minus AP ratio on W, minus AP ratio on R. It's a bunch of small changes here. Ultimately, one thing we have noticed is that AD champs tend to be filling out the lower end of the spectrum here on Swiftplay. And so actually choosing armor pretty often here as a Swiftplay nerf, because AD seems to be a little bit underrepresented here, or underperforming here overall as a class of champions. So doing a little bit of targeting here in terms of stuff. Neela actually doing very well, surprising me a little bit since she prints XP. I wouldn't have thought that it would have been a big deal, but also Neela is pretty hard to lane on, and so getting her gold back later on I think makes sense. Ultimately, Neela doing too well for our balance in Swiftplay, and so minus some AS growth here onto her. Singed, another champion kind of like Kale, where it doesn't really have a landing phase, but scales pretty well, minus AP ratio on Q. Teemo actually is mostly doing way too well in support. In top and jungle, it's more reasonable. Top lane Teemo is actually kind of okay, because of course he's a lane bully, right? And you don't scale him. Jungle Teemo is doing quite well. Support Teemo is doing just like way too well, and is relatively common. Also, he just like stalls games a whole bunch. So this, I think, actually joins every other also alternate game mode where Teemo has R nerfs. He has some in Arena, he has some in ARM as well. And so yeah, over here Teemo has, because of course, like if you're playing Core SR, Classic, right, you have red trinkets, people buy control wards, they're a little bit more cautious and patient and whatnot. And he's not quite so, over the top, but in Swiftplay, he has really good stalling from all the AoE. And yeah, just overall, just doing too well. So nerfing rank 2 and 3 R damage and the AP ratio. Trundle doing too well, minus AS growth. Urgot doing too well, minus flat armor, minus rank up damage on Q. Tending to go for late game scaling here, right? Champions who are doing too well in Swiftplay, get rid of SR, tends to be from inflation. And so on average, going for late game stats in these champions. Yorick minus some flat armor, minus some damage amp on the E, and then Zyra minus some ability power ratio on the passive. Just, pretty much simple, straightforward nerfs in a lot of cases. Often to damage, sometimes to durability and damage. Whatever. That's the patch. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.